All right, I think that's my cue. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Tiff Beatty. I'm the Associate Director of the National Public Housing Museum. So we are the only cultural institution dedicated to telling the story of public housing in the United States, which you're gonna learn a little bit more about tonight, as well as one program in particular, the Beauty Turner Academy, which I'll hand it over to Liu Chen very shortly, program manager of that program, to lead us through an overview of important information related to this program, and also answer any questions you all may have. Sounds like some folks in the room have already applied, which we love. Happy to confirm for folks who've applied that we've received your application, as well as give and share some information for those of you who are interested or are here on behalf of others that may be interested either in this year or in the future, as this is an ongoing program. But first, I want to offer a few housekeeping notes. Been dropping things in the chat. I just want to make sure everyone is open and ready and has everything they need to engage. So we are recording, and so we just want to invite folks to, looks like most people have their camera off, so that is totally cool. If you want to be on video, that's also cool with us. We will have more of an interactive session Q&A towards the end. Just keeping in mind that we are recording until we let you know that we're not. We're also have the transcripts enabled, so if it helps to follow along that way, we invite you to just hit the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can also click more if you're not seeing that. And then if you need any support, just let us know in the chat, or just come off mute. We're a small group today. We're happy to assist however we can. And for those of you watching the video, we'll also have transcripts embedded into that. Try to make this simple and as accessible for everyone as possible. So just a few notes about kind of, in addition to what we're doing here today is just a little bit about the museum. So in addition to telling the story of public housing, we are dedicated to preserving, promoting, and propelling the right of all people to a place to call home. So we're a social justice institution, we're a human rights institution, and we really do believe in the power of art and storytelling to bring these issues into spaces where they are most needed, but also that everyday stories are important. And so storytelling is really important. So we invite you all to bring your full selves and also your stories and your families and your communities into this space. And so we want to just hold all of that with you all as you're here. That life happens, things happen. If you need to excuse yourself and come back, we appreciate that. We just welcome you all into this space to engage in ways that make the most sense for you all. And sort of aligned with that, we also are in solidarity with people around the world. Particularly, we want to call out and really just front and center in thinking about our work as the Public Housing Museum. How do we, acknowledge the various communities that we're in solidarity with? And so it's important for us, also important for me personally, to open this session with the recognition of the sovereignty, of Indigenous nations. So at the museum, we really acknowledge the struggles of Native Americans that are unique and also intertwined with patterns of displacement and forced migration faced by public housing residents and people experiencing homelessness, and Indigenous communities all over the world that are constantly under threat of environmental and social issues. And so we want to express solidarity with Native people and also share this land acknowledgement as one expression of that. So as I'm based in Chicago, we also invite you all to share land acknowledgements if you have them from where you are. But I will kick us off as I'm joining from my community here, which some call Bronzeville, also known as the Low End, located in the region we call Chicago. located at the intersection of several waterways, Lake Michigan, for example, Chicago River. The land and water that we currently occupy has naturally become a site of travel and nourishment for many tribes. We want to specifically call out the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi people, as well as the Ho-Chunk, the Menominee, the Meskwaki, the Sauk, the Miami, the Kickapoo, as well as many other Indigenous nations who are the past, current, and future caretakers of the land, water, people, animals, and all that is sacred. So again, we invite you to drop your land acknowledgement or ancestor acknowledgement, whoever you want to acknowledge, however you want to acknowledge as you show up in this space. And we want to acknowledge you all for being here. And those of you that are watching this video, we thank you for your time. We look forward to continuing this relationship. And this is so the point where I will now hand it off to Liu to get into the nitty gritty and tell us all about the Beauty Turner Academy. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiff. I like the model of kind of general acknowledgements, right? There's a lot of things to acknowledge in our world. I feel like there's some weeks that we have like a mass shooting every day, you know, and it's like, or not every day, every week. Sometimes it feels like every day, and it can be hard to like then go into the Zoomosphere and like not kind of acknowledge that. So I'm Liu Chen. We can acknowledge that it is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. Give it up for the nerds. So we're trying this new Mark, you have to give me that remote control again. We're trying a new tech thing right now, so I think it's working. Click to start. Come on. There we go. Okay, so just a bit of overview of what we'll be talking about tonight. I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview just of oral history as a whole, as well as Miss Beauty Turner. If you've come to some of our other Beauty Turner Academy events, you might know a little bit about her already, but it's really important for us as a history museum that we're not just invoking her name, but really honoring the legacy that Miss Beauty left and continues to leave in Bronzeville and in all of Chicago. We'll talk more about kind of the specifics of the Beauty Turner Academy generally and this year. I'm going to give you all just a little bit of insight into the selection process, like why are these the questions on the application and what actually makes a difference in terms of what we are looking for in the cohort. And then we will wrap up with a couple of frequently asked questions and give you all the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. Apologies for the train going by. All right, so let me get into it. What is oral history? We have a great graphic here by someone named Brandon Black, not Brandon Johnson, our new mayor. And I want to emphasize that like this is a beautiful drawing, and these are actually the words and the reflections from the cohort last year. We invited Brandon to join us in our kind of first closing, and all of the soon-to-be graduates shared kind of their understandings of what oral history is, as well as a host of other topics. So these are their own thoughts on what oral history is. As you can see, oral history is something that centers stories within a context, within the larger context. And by context, we mean both kind of what is going on in the world, in the country, as well as an individual's personal context, their identities, how they see the world. And we really focus on that one person in each interview. We call them the narrator. They're narrating the story. You might also hear us talk about narrative history. And so we're really focused on that narrator and how they understand the world and the past from their perspective, from their words. The narrator is the expert of the story, and I won't nerd out too much about oral history, but you definitely will find, and public housing history is no exception, you'll find people's stories sometimes seem to contradict each other. And that's actually something that we really want to lean into. I've talked to other people who are interested in the program, and they'll say, like, my experience of public housing is really different from these other people's experiences. And I don't want to like rain on anyone's parade, but my experience is really different, and we lean into that. We want to tell a story that's complex, and there is actually no one story. It's just like a group of stories, right, that give us a better understanding of history. um, a really fundamental part of oral history is about relationships, not only building relationships and building trust, but sustaining those relationships over months and usually years of time. And so with that, we want to really move at the speed of trust. We want to move. Usually, that means slower, more slowly, um, and so we don't want to rush that process. I think when you think of other mediums or other fields that emphasize storytelling and interviews, like journalism is one of the closest related fields to oral history. And I think this is one way that really separates us from journalism. Journalists' time is usually of the essence. They're trying to break the news, they're trying to get right in there immediately after things happened. And we really do, we like to move slow. We don't want people to feel like we're extracting their stories. And we not only want them to not feel that way, that is part of our ethos. We want it to feel like something where we're really building this interview and this relationship together with people. Um, that being said, there is still a lot of crossover with journalism. We'll actually get into that when we talk about Miss Beauty. Um, but I think the sort of the ethics and approach are kind of really the biggest difference between journalism. And then one other thing that I want to just mention while we're on this slide is that even though the Beauty Turner Academy is relatively new, last year was our first cohort, um, the National Public Housing Museum has been centering oral history in really the entire creation of the museum. So we've been collecting stories since I think 2010, or maybe even a few years earlier. And we've been actively training public housing residents to be oral historians since 2017. Um, if you know a little bit more about oral history, you might have heard of the Oral History Summer School with Suzanne Snyder. She's one of the first people that we collaborated with on training. And the Beauty Turner Academy, we're really proud of because this is our curriculum. We decided what we're going to teach every week. Eve Ewing, she hosted the showcase last week. She was one of the instrumental Chicago educators who was involved in dreaming up the Beauty Turner Academy, as well as Kahari Humphreys and Maya Jones and Lisa Lee, who's our executive director. All right, so I'm gonna move a little bit, like I said, into Miss Beauty. Beauty lived in the neighborhood that Tiff and I now live in, Bronzeville on the near south side. She lived in the Robert Taylor homes for 16 years. Robert Taylor homes no longer exist. They were demolished along with uh, a large majority of high rise public housing in Chicago. And those buildings were demolished as a part of the plan for transformation, which is also a really important part in Miss Beauty's story. In the kind of early 2000s, as buildings were starting to come down, she really took to the streets, took to her blog, which is still out there if you want to take a look at it, and was like, hey, like, this is not okay. Like, our buildings are being demolished, and in turn, our communities are being really, really damaged. People's lives are being really damaged, and we need to speak up. We need to speak out. We, as the residents, are the ones who know the most about what public housing actually is, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so we need our voices elevated. And that's part of why she founded the ghetto bus tours. You can see on the screen, this stood for greatest history ever, told to our people. As Tiff says, the people, the P is silent, but the people are not. And Tiff has a great poem that's related to Beauty Turner's legacy that you might get to hear if we're lucky when we open up this summer's academy. And chose these pictures because I really like these action shots where you see like the microphone is not pointed at Beauty, it's pointed at the other residents who I'm not sure. I don't want to say because I don't know which complex this is in. I know that she toured through a lot of complexes that were still standing, and then she also took people to places where public housing no longer stood but used to stand. So that's the picture on the right, and then the picture on the left. You see, some of the people that she was teaching about public housing history. As I said at the top, it's really important to us as a museum that we're not only invoking Miss Beauty's name, but that we're really elevating her legacy, that we're excavating it, and bringing new stories to the forefront about her legacy. So we kicked that off last summer with two interviews with Larry Turner, who's her eldest son, hoping to maybe interview her other children. There are some public housing leaders in Chicago who are still around who knew Miss Beauty really well, who we're hoping to interview. She actually even worked with like a political science professor at Columbia University. We'll track him down eventually. So that's kind of part of our ongoing work in the oral history program as well. All right, so I'm gonna kind of tell you a little bit about what's unique about the Beauty Turner Academy that you're not necessarily going to find in other, boot camps or programs that are about narrative storytelling. So the first is kind of, we really emphasize making this a training that can be useful for people who don't necessarily see themselves as historians. That's not necessarily like their drive in life. We want this to be applicable to different creative projects, different organizing and activist projects, and life paths, so that anyone can benefit from taking this training. We do have a really specific focus on the public housing history, public housing communities, and their stories. So this is kind of like a really fundamental thing to me as an oral historian. I really believe that communities should be in charge of kind of their own histories and their own narratives, community-based history, right? So we want to focus on giving you all the agency and like empowering you to make these decisions about your own communities and how they are remembered. This is a program that is going to develop your skills. It's going to also develop who you are as a person. This is something that a lot of people who go through oral history training talk about. And I think the crux of that is the emphasis on deep listening in oral history practice. A lot of people come to oral history because they like to tell stories and we like to hear them. And deep listening is not only about hearing, but it's about really, really listening to people, listening to their struggles, their pains, their joys, getting to know their perspectives. Like I said, sometimes that might conflict with other stories that you've heard or your own opinions. And we can really lean into that. We don't have to try to only tell one story of what public housing was like or what the civil rights movement was like, right? Because when we try to tell one story, we're always going to be silencing and dampening other ones. One other thing I want to mention with the skill development and personal development, there's going to be kind of specific technical skills that we're going to be teaching. So annoyingly, there's a company that makes audio equipment that's also called Zoom that is separate from this Zoom platform. Very frustrating when you're trying to write equipment lists and all of that. So everyone is going to get what's called a H5 recorder. This is kind of like a midline, really great professional audio recorder that is both easy to use and also something that you're going to be able to use for like decades from now. You could still be using this audio recorder. And then you'll get some other goodies to sort of support your audio work. And then there's also a stipend, right? So there's this year it's going to be $1,000 stipend. The audio kit will be about $500 worth of equipment. Probably get a couple books in there. All of that is to sort of support your ongoing development as storytellers in this world. And then we also want to make sure that we're communicating that like it's not just the 10-week training, and we'll get more into this in a couple slides, but it's not just the 10-week training. We have like year-round programming where you're going to be able to continue developing your skills, and not only skills but like really, we're in the midst of writing a grant right now, and um, in the grant, we're talking about how like this really is an entry point for a big part of our workforce. We want to be hiring you after you graduate from this program to help us design the archive, write archival policy, continue collecting interviews, continue, spreading how many perspectives we can represent in this archive. So really, we see this as an investment in long-term relationships, right? On the theme of relationship building. So as a kind of teaser for all of that, we're gonna share a short video from one of our graduates from the 22 cohort who I think really like encapsulates what can come out of this program. So his name's Jellystone. He's going to be a mentor for this upcoming cohort, and we're kind of outlining some other work that Jellystone's going to be doing with us for the next year. And this is just like an absolutely beautiful video that he put together. So without further ado, I'm going to get that playing.
Do you have any questions for me? Have you ever been to Cabrini Green? Did you ever go?
Citywide 7,000 units, the majority of them in high-rises, have been demolished.
But I swear, I'm sorry. I don't care what nobody say. Like, I swear, when we was like living there, it was like 3 in the morning one day or whatever time it was, and it was dark, and I saw this shadow walk into my mama's room, and I just like, I don't know where you're gonna include this because this is paranormal activity. Like, I could see what it looks like in my head. I can't necessarily like describe it because like
I feel like I don't remember how many rooms it was. I feel like it was like maybe 3 rooms and like a really big closet that like me, my sister, and my mom like slept in. That became our room. Yeah, it was like a really big closet like in the middle of the hallway, and we like had a curtain to like basically make a door.
I think it would just be nice to have a physical thing to like be able to point to and look at, because a lot of people did a lot of living there. And it's like there's nothing in those fields right now, so y'all displaced people to have nothing there.
I remember running for the elevator. Like, I feel like a joke that my family has about me that I don't know is true is like I learned to run before I learned to walk, and like running because I was like running for the elevator, like with my family, like, hold the elevator. And I remember people yelling, "Hold the elevator!" to get on this elevator because the elevator.
And I was just
like,
getting on the elevator and then it was like, "It's gonna be okay," and she was holding
place.
my hand, and then the elevator got stuck.
Do you feel comfortable telling me how many times you moved? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think everybody was close. It was easier to see family, and like be in community with people. I miss like living around only Black people.
like, I don't know, I feel like my mom told more stories when we lived in the Wells and we prayed together more.
My granny, her name was Cassie. Cassie may wake up. My cousins, Muffin, Pebbles, and Ashley. On my mom's side, like my granny and her brothers. Like on my dad's side, like my grandma Marie and my uncle Ronald, who he is passed now, but she's still alive.
If there is one thing you could say to the people who like are responsible for the fact that Cabrini Green doesn't exist the way that it used to exist, what would you say to them?
I don't know. I don't know what I would say.
I don't know, memories are weird. Memories are weird, and sometimes they feel like water, I guess, and things can get like lost in water, but you remember how it feels.
Yes, lots of love for Jellystone in the chat, as absolutely deserves. Jellystone is also a poet, and I definitely feel like it has that poet's sensibility to it. So anyway, that's just a little teaser, like I said. And if you're in the cohort this year, you'll get to hang out with Jellystone a lot. So I'm gonna just run over some of the kind of nitty gritty numbers for the academy. These are also, online. We'll share the link at the end of the info session if you need to refer back to them. So we are running. Here we go. So the training period runs for 10 weeks. We select the day of the week. So if you've looked at the app, you kind of know that there's a section towards the end of the application that asks about your schedule. That's because we kind of pick the day of the week and the time based on who the cohort is and when they are available. So we don't have the exact dates yet, but it will be the week of June 12th through that August 25th is a Friday. So it's like August 22nd, week of August 22nd. Learn and practice the ins and outs of oral history. We will have a 2-hour Zoom session once a week. And then this is a bit of a change from last year. So there's going to be a very minimal amount of work that is required in between sessions. This is how you're going to get the most out of the program and really figure out how oral history fits into your life, your practice, your future. And then there'll be kind of some additional resources, listening exercises, especially that we give you as optional work. All the optional work each week, it won't be more than 2 hours. Again, it is optional, so it's kind of engage with what draws you in, engage with what you're excited about. But the sort of minimum requirement for the training is only that 2.5 hours. The stipend, like I said earlier, is $1,000 each, and then you'll get your professional audio equipment. And then I kind of wanted to just have this preview of the 2 apprenticeship options. So in the fall, we do, depending on how many people are interested, we'll do 1 or 2 rounds of a 5-week apprenticeship. This is to guide you through every step of the interview process. So you're going to get some practice doing oral history interviewing during the training, but the interviewing apprenticeship is when you really go start to finish of the oral history process. So that involves outreach, it involves prep, it involves doing the actual interview, and then it involves post-production. So it's kind of more steps than you might think it is when you're first learning about it. Like I said, those are 5 weeks. And then in the winter and the early spring, we do what we call a senior apprenticeship. It's 10 weeks again. And this is like diving into everything a little bit deeper. So specifically in the senior apprenticeship, we focus on learning more about archives, and more about curation, especially. And we also kind of go into post-production on a deeper level. If you were reading the captions in Jellystone's video, you notice that he captioned his video with AAVE. We have one of our archival advisors. Her focus is on transcribing Black voices. And so we really want every part of oral history to feel like something that you have agency over. And so sometimes that involves transcribing dialect in a certain way. Like I said earlier, I didn't say this earlier, but maybe you can kind of sense it from the progression here. Each additional training is kind of a step up in what we're asking of folks. So you see that the training period is like really pretty low stakes, low barrier to entry. Each apprenticeship, we kind of ramp up our expectations of you with the intention that if you go through that entire year long of programming, you're really ready at the end of it to like now teach other people. And like I said, I think Jellystone's such a great example of what we kind of hope the progression to be is, just because he'll be mentoring with us this coming year. I see a hand. I'm gonna go over the application real fast, and then I will get to questions. So if you don't mind, you can write it down or you can put it in the chat if you are afraid you're gonna forget. And then we'll get to that in a couple minutes. Okay, so in the application, I think is 16 questions. And, I'm someone who really values transparency. And so I just want to kind of give you all some insight into how we're actually evaluating those applications. There's definitely questions in there that we are asking kind of just generally. There are other questions that are more significant in terms of how we evaluate. So we're specifically looking at these kind of 5 different qualities, really the top 4, because number 5, hopefully everyone's on board with housing as a human right. But we're looking at these 4 qualities and evaluating like how well you fit into those. In an ideal world, and actually last year I kind of had the naive hope that we would be able to include everyone in the training, but because we have some advisors who are very well known in the world who help us get this application out there, we've gotten a larger pool of applicants than we expected. And so we do have to kind of limit the cohort size just based on our capacity to really give you that direct mentorship. And so we're looking at folks who are interested in this field, public history, storytelling as resistance, and especially how can we use history and storytelling for both creative expression and for kind of social political organizing. We're hoping that you are folks who are already somewhat active in your neighborhoods and communities. I don't want this to feel like you have to already be like a super engaged organizer, but it's good to already have some, sense of community with the folks around you who you might be interviewing in the future. Like I said at the top, meaningful relationship building and sustaining those relationships is one of the most important things in oral history. And so we want folks who are really eager to do that, and especially eager to do that with people who are, from different parts of the country or, have differences from you. And then lastly, it's not required, but it's really great if you are folks who are committed to using oral history for a long time, whether that is as a part of our oral history core or it's using oral history in your own, work. We had 2 people from Massachusetts in the last cohort who they didn't do the senior apprenticeship, but they did the first apprenticeship, and they actually while they were doing that apprenticeship, they found out that they had received a grant to pass on their oral history training to their community in Massachusetts. So that's a great example of what we mean by long-term engagement, even if it's not with the National Public Housing Museum. Three other things that will impact the selection is access to education. So specifically, specifically people with less access to formal education will be prioritized since, oh my gosh, why is this? Mark, do you mind just going back to, it's not doing what I want it to, thank you. Folks with less access to formal education will be prioritized since this is the type of training that can have, you know, a really big impact for folks who otherwise don't have a lot of avenues for education. We want to have a diverse cohort, definitely in terms of identities and perspectives that you bring to the group, but also, you know, other things like where you are in the country. Part of why and how we envisioned the Beauty Tuner Academy in the way that we have is so that we are building a network of folks across the country who can, you know, already be embedded in diverse communities and go to their communities and document the stories and then add to the archive. So kind of getting that range of geography is important. And then lastly, this sort of communicativeness, quality, how easy is it to get a hold of you? As we're teaching and providing all of these resources, it's really important for us to be able to get a hold of you. It's also important as you are kind of establishing yourself as a cohort that you're able to communicate with each other. That was one of the things that we're really trying to emphasize in the second year of Beauty Tuner Academy, is cultivating community. And as we all know, having lived through you know, the height of the COVID pandemic, it can be really hard to do that over Zoom. And so we're trying out some new things this year to try to help that along. I want to kind of make sure we're open about the fact that, like, I don't need a response from you on an email like 5 minutes later, but if it's taking us a week or more to get a hold of you, that's kind of indicative of the fact that it's going to be a little bit harder to communicate with you over the course of this 10-week program. And so we are factoring that into account. You know, I am disabled, totally understand that sometimes capacity is limited. So I don't want this to feel like policing your communication level, but please do try to be proactive. Also, like, be proactive in knowing and communicating what your preferences are. You know, some people like strongly prefer text over email. Some people are reverse. Some people prefer phone calls. So if you have that sense about yourself of how you communicate best, that's also super helpful for us. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to say on the slide is that all of the applications will be evaluated by both myself and another person. So we have other staff members, we have our kind of mentors who we've already hired, and then we also have past graduates from last year's cohort who will be, there will be at least one other person from one of those groups looking over your application. All right, so we have a few FAQs. And Olivia, I wonder, do you want to ask your question now, or do you want to ask it after the FAQs?
I think after, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so these are all pretty straightforward, and we have them on the FAQ page. I think that's in the links, in the chat for links, to refer back to later. So, do you have to live in Chicago to participate? No, as we just said, part of what we want is to actually get a lot of folks from outside of Chicago who can continue creating a wide array of stories in the archives. So you can be located anywhere in the US. Last year, we did allow one person from outside of the country. We are going to stick to inside of the country this year just for some pragmatic reasons. But anywhere in the US, you can join us. Is this only for youth? No, almost anyone can participate in terms of age. We had some really, really great kind of like intergenerational bonds created last year, and we're hoping to, again, get a really diverse range of ages. We are asking folks to be 16 years and older because of kind of the commitment that you're making, but we are leaving the door open if there are some young folks who are really, really eager to participate. Just email me, lchen@nphm.org, and we will chat about it. Okay, so public housing obviously is the emphasis with this academy. We do focus on serving people with current or past lived experience in publicly funded housing. So that includes sort of traditional public housing. This is also called Section 9 housing, as well as people with Section 8 housing. So that's also called housing choice vouchers, project-based vouchers, lots of different names for that, and mixed income sites. That's the form of public housing. A lot of public housing that's being created now is mixed income. So all of those count as sort of lived experience. We will also consider folks with self-defined meaningful connections to public housing. And we have a question in the application to kind of go into detail about that, if that is how you are connected to public housing. You know, again, from a transparency perspective, folks with lived experience are going to get a leg up. They're going to get priority, but we did have, I think we had like 3 to 5 folks from our cohort last year who had other types of connections to public housing. So definitely all folks welcome to apply. Will there be homework? This is one of the questions that's changed, like I said. So we're trying to be as accessible and adaptable to y'all's needs as possible. Each week we'll have, 10 to 30 minutes of required reflection outside of our 2-hour sessions, just to really make sure that you are thinking about your own self and your own use of oral history. There will be other kind of suggested exercises, like I said, primarily listening exercises. We'll also have other writing prompts, some reading, but we try to really limit the reading prompts, reading exercises. And those are suggested. They're going to be no more than 2 hours, and you will absolutely still learn the fundamentals of oral history if all you're doing is attending those 2 hours. The more you put in, the more you're going to get out, but we really want this to be accessible for everyone. This is an important question, and I want to emphasize, please be in contact as soon as you can if this is something that you're worried about. So a lot of public housing residents have limits on their monthly income, and so kind of the stipend gets a little sticky there. What we did last year, which did work for some people, is that we gave stipends via gift card, and that's something that we'll reach out to once we finalize the cohort. That being said, I want to be transparent. There are certain, especially with some of the ways that the IRS has gotten more strict, everyone still does have to fill out a W-9, even if it's a gift card stipend for anything $600 or over. So if this is a big concern for you, we want to work with you to make it work, but it's very case-by-case basis. So just please reach out to me if this is something that's potentially of concern. All right, that's it for me droning on. So gonna open it up for audience questions now. Yes, go ahead, Olivia.
So what's the dropout rate for the program? Because like apparently it's in 3 stages for like about a year or so. Was there? Did anyone
Sorry,
Oh, do you need me to repeat it? I'm sorry.
yeah, go ahead and repeat your question.
Yeah, like what would you say is the dropout rate for like the program? Because apparently it goes in 3 stages.
Yeah. So we started with 22 in our cohort last year. We ended with 22. There was one person who dropped out.
Okay.
Yeah, so we only had one person drop out, and it was kind of like a logistical thing. They weren't able to commit the time anymore, and it was like early enough that we were able to fill their spot. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but otherwise we have a very high retention rate, and we did kind of expect to have more people drop out, but we didn't.
Hey,
Oh,
can you, I think part of the question was also about the 3 stages. So the apprenticeships included,
Oh,
want to talk a little bit about that?
yeah. So, like I said, we had 22 in the training. We had about half of those people continue with the interviewing apprenticeship. So we had about 10, and then we had 3 people do the senior apprenticeship. And those were kind of, it's fairly self-selecting, you know, and like I also want to emphasize that like if you only do the training, you're still a graduate of the program. We still consider you to be well trained in oral history. We still would offer you future job opportunities. I think that interviewing apprenticeship is like, in my mind, if you want to do oral history long term, that's a really key thing to do just because you really get that hands-on support. But you know, life happens. There's a lot of folks who have interest, but they just don't have time. And part of how we structure the apprenticeships is that you can jump in, you can kind of jump back into the program through the apprenticeships, even if you didn't do them in the past year. So when we do the interviewing apprenticeship this fall, there's probably going to be at least one, if not more, folks who did the training last summer who are going to kind of jump back into the program and take that opportunity to get some more training.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what's the senior? So a senior apprenticeship, is that when you're starting to make your own project?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I don't want to get like too into the nitty gritty, but the senior apprenticeship is a little different from the others for a few reasons. So the senior apprenticeship, we start paying by the hour instead of a stipend. So it's kind of some of that skill development in terms of tracking your hours, invoicing your hours. And then, yeah, we kind of give people the option with the first apprenticeship to either just be like assigned an interview lead or to do their own outreach. Um, Outreach can take a long time. And so some people wanted to kind of do their own project, but they just didn't have enough kind of that sense of who they were going to interview in order to do it. The 3 senior apprentices from this past year, they all kind of had their own project from the interviewing apprenticeship. And so they were able to kind of build on it in the senior apprenticeship.
Yeah.
But you know, I think the other thing that's really kind of cool about oral history is that you do just one interview and you're going to already have thoughts and ideas about kind of follow-up questions and other people you want to interview. And so like an interview kind of can be a project in and of itself. I know that sounds a little funny, but the point of the interviewing apprenticeship is really to get your feet wet with every step of the process. And then in the senior apprenticeship, you start building some of those sort of project design, project execution skills.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions out there? Yeah, so Tiff dropped in the chat again the BTA page on our website, and that I meant to talk about this and I forgot. We've delineated some of the sort of different learning goals for the different stages. So you can see on the website, like, here's what you can expect if you do just the training. Here's what to expect if you do the training and the first apprenticeship, and here's what to expect if you do that senior apprenticeship as well.
Haley, is it also cool to drop the FAQ sheet?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so this FAQ sheet that Tiff just shared in the chat has it has the questions we covered. It has a few other questions as well. We're gonna close out this info session soon unless there's any other questions from our remaining audience members. But thank you all so much for attending tonight, and please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any other questions that you think of later, I'll put my email in the chat too. It's short and easy. Oops, that was just a Tiff. Tiff knows my email very well. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your Thursday night and hope to get your application soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.